Welcome to the Lewis and Clark Expedition Study Guide. I'm not going to give you every detail about the Lewis and Clark expedition, but I am going to hit some of the highlights. Now, the main purpose of the expedition was to find a water route from the Mississippi River to the Pacific Ocean. The Louisiana Purchase doubled the size of the United States. The Louisiana Purchase occurred in 1803 when James Monroe and Robert Livingston, under the direction of President Thomas Jefferson, approached France to buy New Orleans. Surprisingly, they left having bought the entire Louisiana Territory for $15 million. Congress approved the Louisiana Purchase Treaty. President Jefferson then selected his former personal secretary, Meriwether Lewis, to lead an expedition to explore this new land. Meriwether Lewis asked his good friend from the Army, William Clark, to co-lead the expedition. Their job was to find a water route from the Mississippi River to the Pacific Ocean, to record all information about plants, animals, Native Americans that they could find, and they were to map the territory as they crossed it. Lewis and his dog Seaman, and Clark and his slave York, chose about 40 other men to join them on their journey. They called themselves the Corps of Discovery. Now, there's some question about the exact number of men. Every site I research gives me a different number, but we're going to go with about 40. Their journey started at the Missouri River. In the spring of 1804, the Corps departed from St. Louis and traveled northwest along the Missouri River toward the Pacific Ocean. In July, the Corps met up with their first Native American tribes, the Oto and the Missouri tribes. And they were very welcoming and very friendly. They did a lot of training, but they did warn them that along their journey they would run into the Sioux, and not to expect such a friendly welcome from the Sioux. Lewis spoke to the tribes about the United States now being in control of Louisiana Territory, and that we needed to make sure that there was peace between the Americans and the Native Americans. The Corps then moved on, continued their journey, and on August 30th, they met up with the Yankton Sioux at Calumet Bluff. They were very surprised that the Sioux did not show the aggression that they had been warned about, and they actually had a very good visit, and they left on very friendly terms. The Corps then continued to travel by keelboat, stopping to hunt and explore along the way, picking plants, drawing pictures, writing descriptions, entering the information in their journals, and all of this was sent back to Jefferson. Now, the Corps approached another Sioux camp, which turned out to be less than peaceful. This was more like what they had been warned about. Lewis tried to begin a council to discuss peace, but he was met with a lot of suspicion. The Teton Sioux did not want these white men in their territory. However, by keeping cool heads and not letting the aggression get out of hand, they did manage to keep from starting a fight with the Native American tribe. As they were moving along their journey, the weather started turning cold, and they knew that they needed to build a winter camp. Well, they decided to make this winter camp with the Mandan tribe in the Mandan villages of North Dakota. They built a log fort that they called Fort Mandan, and they finished it on December 24th of 1804. Now, while they were with the Mandan tribe over the winter, they learned a lot about trading from these Mandan villagers, who did a lot of trading amongst the other tribes. As I said, Clark had also brought his slave, who was named York. And the Native Americans were fascinated with York, as they'd never seen black skin before, or the curly hair. They would rub his skin to see if the color would come off, and they would pull at his hair to see if it would stay straight, and would laugh whenever it would spring back to a curl again. He was seen as very powerful and often make loud roaring sounds as a way to kind of intimidate them and make them see that he was strong, and therefore he was given the nickname Strong Medicine. York was treated as an equal member of the Corps of Discovery. He was given the same task as the others. He was given the same food, the same treatment, the same respect, because he was a very good hunter. So therefore, he probably experienced for the first time in his life true acceptance as an equal among white men. While in the Mandan camp, Lewis and Clark met a French trapper named Toussaint Charbonneau. He was married to two Native American women. One of them was a Shoshone girl named Sacagawea. She was 17. Sacagawea had been kidnapped from the Shoshone tribe when she was 12 years old. She gave birth to a son. They called him Little Pump. She had her son just before joining the Corps. Her husband had been hired to guide the expedition. Sacagawea worked as a translator for the Corps of Discovery. She spoke Shoshone and then translated that to Hidatsa for Charbonneau, who would translate to French for the French Corps member who could translate to English for Lewis and Clark, so they would know what the Native Americans were saying. On April 7th of 1805, Lewis and Clark continued west. They left the Mandan village, giving them the fort. And along the journey, the Corps discovered many unusual animals, like the mountain sheep, a mule deer, and a grizzly bear. All animals they'd never seen back east. When they finally reached the Rocky Mountains, Lewis and Clark weren't sure how they were going to cross these mountains. Luckily, they ran into the Shoshone tribe and learned that Sacagawea's brother was now the chief of the tribe. He was so happy that they had brought his sister back that he gave them all the assistance that they needed. He offered advice on the best routes to cross the mountains, gave them horses and food, and even sent a couple of braves to guide them on their journey. As they crossed the Rockies, they noticed that the flow of the rivers changed from east to west. They had now crossed what's called the Continental Divide. They decided to take an old Native American trail. Along the way, they found it was a very, very difficult trail with very little food. Many of their horses became crippled or fell off the mountains. And by the time they were coming down the other side, they were in pretty bad shape. As they continued down the Rocky Mountains, starving and weak, they met the Nez Perce tribe, who were very friendly, fed them, and allowed them to rest. They did, however, have a hard time translating because none of them spoke the Nez Perce language. On October 16th, they entered the Columbia River, which was rushing towards the Pacific Ocean, which was their ultimate goal. They finally reached the Pacific Ocean in November of 1805, where they rode on a tree by land from the U states in 1804 and 5. The Corps built Fort Clatsop in Oregon for the winter. On March 23rd of 1806, the Corps of Discovery began their journey home. The return trip took 1 year, and the Corps were treated as heroes throughout the United States, despite the fact that they did not actually find a water route to the Pacific Ocean because one does not exist. And there you have your study guide for Lewis and Clark's expedition.